out there right now, so hypothermia is definitely an issue, not to mention the fact that the size of this plane in the Hudson River, when you see these pictures in a few moments. Right now, we've got someone on the phone right now. This is Chris Raggi in the CBS 2 newsroom. Please identify yourself and tell me what you see on the ground there.
Hi, Chris. This is Gloria Schaefer. I'm too far north to see where it actually landed, but I'm on 73rd and Riverside in my apartment, and I watched it come down. The nose was up in the air like it was coming in for a landing, but it was clearly over the water.
And Gloria, how long ago was this? You said this was, what, about 10, 15 minutes ago?
Yeah, about 10, 15 minutes ago. I mean, it didn't look like a distressed plane. It looked like it was coming in for a landing at Newark, but it just wasn't over Newark. It was over the Hudson River.
Obviously, wheels were not down or anything to that effect. Could you see, did the plane look like it was in distress? Was it rocking back and forth, or did it
It wasn't rocking back and forth. It was coming down smoothly like it was lining up for the runway. And a few people in their cars got out on the West Side Highway and must have watched it complete its landing. And based on the footage I'm seeing on TV now, it looks like it landed and didn't crash or break apart or anything. It looks like it's in a solid piece, and life rafts are in the water, and it looks like people are in the life rafts, and there's New York waterway ferries kind of all drawing towards it. Looks like they're grabbing passengers. It's a little tough to tell from the footage. All
right, Gloria, do me a favor. Hang on right there. We've got some new information in right now that we just want to update our audience with right now. This is Flight 1549, took off from LaGuardia Airport. This is a US Airways Airbus 380, which is well, resting precariously right now in the Hudson River. Apparently, this is the cause of a bird strike. Now, these are initial reports that we're getting in right now. Joe Bierman is live in Chopper 2 HD as he approaches the scene for us. Joe, what can you add to this?
Hey, Chris, there was a lot of confusion initially because there was a report of a movie being shot in the area. But as you can see, just as we come around this building here in Jersey City, there is the tail of an airplane sitting submerged in the Hudson River. Police are calling it what they refer to normally by the tower as a regional jet. It's one of the smaller jets, but they are saying it's possibly about 60 people on board the jet is what it normally carries. But as you can see, all the emergency services have converged on the ship. New York Waterways runs back and forth across the Hudson River there all day, and they immediately got some of the ferries there. The only thing you can see is the US Air logo sticking up there on the tail. The FAA has already put in restrictions as far because of all the emergency operations.
Okay, as you can see, Joe Bierman in Chopper 2 HD. A lot of choppers in the area right now. Dana Tyler joins me here on the desk as we continue to look at these pictures. Let's just reconfirm what we do know at this point. This is Flight 1549 leaving LaGuardia Airport. Apparently, this flight the victim of a bird strike. From Gloria, our eyewitness who we talked to a few seconds ago, Dana, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to her at all. She said the pilot did what looks like an admirable, an enviable job of nose up, getting the plane, gliding it in, so there was no breakup from what we could see. A few moments ago when we first came on, you could see a little bit more of the plane at that point, and now we can just see the tip of the wing.
We could also see pictures of people, boats nearby, and there did appear to be some rescues, but we don't know that yet. We also just got information that this flight, this US Airways jet, was en route from LaGuardia to Charlotte, North Carolina, when it made this unscheduled landing, this crash landing in the Hudson River. This is in the mid-40s near the USS Intrepid, and out there, as you can see, so many of the different water service boats that carry people along the Hudson. In just a few moments, we're going to talk to Dr. Max Gomez, because as we know, 18 degrees, much colder in that frigid water. Yeah,
hypothermia definitely something that needs, well, you know what, I will say this. To be, I guess, on board a plane to experience something like this, hypothermia may not be the first thing you're thinking about. Getting out alive, which you know, again, we have no update right now on injuries, survivors, any casualties, anything of that nature. This is all very preliminary. All of this is coming. You're seeing these pictures as we're seeing them right now. The one thing we can say, it looks as though the ferry system, it looks like some of the EMT workers were able to respond to this very, very quickly. You can see some of the rescue boats that have been moving just very quickly to get in position. And again, from our eyewitness, Gloria, who we spoke to, who was a witness to this accident, said from what it looks like, the captain did a heck of a job by getting this plane down.
Can you imagine? And to be, we know the river is a corridor for both airports, the Newark Airport and LaGuardia Airport, but to do that, and we don't know the depths of the water either, or the speed that he was going at that time, but the fact that some of it is above the water line is encouraging.
Exactly, and one thing you also have to consider, fully loaded with fuel, just leaving from LaGuardia right now. That's an additional, I guess, danger involved here. But let's go back to Joe Bierman right now. I think we've reestablished picture and reestablished audio with Joe. Joe, what have you got?
What they call runway 31, which is kind of a westbound runway that would have taken the aircraft up over the Triborough Bridge, over Central Park. And if words of the bird strike are true, I assume maybe he had some sort of engine failure, that bird went into one of the engines and the pilot had no option but to land here in the middle of the Hudson River. Now what you're looking at, they're all the New York Waterways ferries. Police are describing people getting off the jet onto the New York Waterways ferry. We assume they're going to go over to the Jersey side, maybe over in Weehawken. On the right side of your screen, you'll see a Circle Line ferry. That Circle Line ferry probably came out from the New York side at 42nd Street there. Now, the aircraft, as you can see, is pretty much submerged. The only thing that is visible there is the tail. Well, now as we get a look, you can see part of the main fuselage. You can see the US Airways name and logo there. So the aircraft did not completely sink. So that's a good thing. Maybe a lot of folks got out. But at this point, a massive casualty alert has been issued in the city, which will just bring emergency equipment from the Jersey side, from the city side, to the scene. Now, as I say, there was some confusion because apparently they were shooting a movie or something on the west side. So they initially thought this might be part of the movie. But then once they confirmed it was a departure out of LaGuardia, as I say, it appears they were using runway 31, which is about 310 degrees, which would have been a westbound departure, as I say, over the Triborough Bridge, over Central Park. And you are saying that they had a bird strike. So it might have been something that the windshield was shattered, or one of the birds ingested caused a major failure in the engine.
Joe?
One of the reasons we can't get, yes, Dana.
I'm sorry, we have someone on the phone who witnessed it, and can you stand by for us, hold that picture for us?
Sure.
We have Joyce Cordero. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Joyce, a producer at 60 Minutes, and you saw this plane go down. Can you tell us what you saw?
Absolutely. I was at my office building, which has rather large windows, and you can see right to the Hudson. And I saw a plane getting a little too close, so I sort of hung up on the call that I was on and ran over to the glass, sort of to look directly to the Hudson, and I saw the plane right in the water. And it was so shocking, I couldn't believe my eyes. And I sort of started alerting everyone in the office, and everyone was shocked. And we got some binoculars out, looked out the window, and saw people standing on the aircraft, on the wings of the aircraft.
Which at that time, because they seem to be submerged now, so about what time was that, Joyce?
Gosh, I was so taken by the event that I didn't actually look at the exact time that it happened, but I did see it seemed that the floating devices came out, and the plane was certainly right at the surface. You could see the entire body of the plane, and with binoculars we were definitely able to see folks sort of standing. They'd made it out, and they were standing on the wing.
Joyce, what were they? I was going to say, how many did it look like? Could you tell in numbers? Was it a dozen? Was it a few dozen?
Gosh, it was a few dozen. Certainly a few dozen, and on both sides of the plane.
Were they able to get the flotation ramps out or anything along those lines?
I did see a flotation ramp open up, and I would say it was on the right side of the plane, if you're looking at the plane directly.
It had to have been almost surreal to see a plane this size flying that low.
I'm telling you, I mean, I couldn't believe my eyes. I walked over to the glass, and it just felt like a surreal moment, like I was dreaming. Describe
again, if you would, just as you saw it going down. It was, the pitch was right, the yaw was right. Did it seem in distress?
When I actually saw it, it was almost right in the water. So it was at the point where it came right in, and then it seemed to float for a while. And again, I saw the floating devices come out, and in closer inspection with binoculars, we were able to see folks on the aircraft wing.
Well, Joyce, we do appreciate your eyewitness account. Once again, folks, this is not a Cessna. This is not a commuter jet. This is an Airbus 320. This is a good-sized plane, capacity 140 to 150 people on board. And let's credit right off the bat, just from what Joyce has told us and from Gloria, our original eyewitness, has told us, let's credit the flight crew, the flight attendants acting this quickly under this type of strain. This is no easy situation, and to be able to, upon impact, to be able to get the flotation device out that quickly, to get these people onto the wings, and we hope to safety. We still don't have any word of any injuries at this point, but from what we've been able to tell you here the last couple of minutes, a number of the passengers were able to make their way onto the wing and to safety thanks to the waterways. You see the vessels that are there right now on your picture.
CBS 2's Marcia Kramer on the phone for us. Marcia, where are you and what do you know? What did you see?
I'm on the east side by 42nd Street. I saw the plane. I saw a boat a rescue boat bringing people. Excuse me, I'm out of breath of running. I saw a rescue boat bringing people from the plane, and there's a huge emergency response. There are dozens and dozens of fire trucks and police here, including police with assault rifles trying to protect the area. Right now, the plane is floating down the East River. One of the police that I spoke to said that at this point, if you want to catch the plane, you got to take a car and go to the end of Manhattan, because the plane is going down the river.
The tide. Marcia, catch your breath.
Yeah.
Catch your breath.
The thing is, I could just go. There's somebody who's just been rescued, and I have to go talk to the person right now. I will call you back in a minute.
Marcia, go do what you have to do. We'll keep an open line. We'll get back to you.
Wake her crew, and you'll wake up Jay Dow. Thank you.
All right, Marcia, go do what you got to do. We'll get back to you. Also, just want to let you know, the tide is obviously a huge concern here. The air temperature, as you can see on your screen, 18 degrees. We have been informed that the water temperature is about 40 to 42 degrees right now. 12-mile-per-hour winds, not a huge issue, but the current is definitely an issue. We want to go to another gentleman who actually saw the plane coming down. Peter is on the line for us right now. Peter, just do me a favor. Give me your last name, would you?
Peter Chano.
And you saw it from New Jersey, is that correct?
Yeah, I saw it from Edgewater, New Jersey. I'm about 2.5 miles away from where it went down. I was looking out my window, and maybe 500 feet away, I was stunned. I saw the plane really low, and the first thing that went through my mind was 9/11, because that's the same thing that happened that day when the two planes went down, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And then today I just got up and I watched it, and as it was going very nicely down. It was just going down further and further and further. I'm saying, but what's going on? It's not going that fast. It took a couple of minutes, and then all of a sudden it went down. There's a place called Rock Harbor. I lost a little bit of the view, and then boom, it was gone. So I waited and waited and waited. I said, well, when's it going to come back up? When's it going to come back up? My wife walks in the door, and I said, listen, you got to come here. I've never seen this before. As I was saying that, I see your Eyewitness News team showing a picture of the plane in the water. I'm shaking. It's crazy.
You didn't believe it, I'm sure. You thought this just can't be happening.
I could not believe what I was seeing. I mean, it was so close to me, and there was nothing wrong. The plane wasn't wobbling. There was no smoke coming out of it. And I'm starting to think, like I did the last time, is this a sightseeing plane that they're starting up going around Manhattan that big?
No, it was US Air Flight 1549, which had just taken off from LaGuardia en route to Charlotte, North Carolina. And this happened within the last hour, and you and our other viewers who've called in did witness the real thing. And we have also had eyewitness accounts of the passengers being rescued. And it's important for us to tell you that we don't know how many were on the plane and how many have been rescued so far, but we have had eyewitnesses see people being rescued.
And that information continues to come in. Dana, I think this is one of the reasons why originally there were some conflicting reports that this could be a movie set, because I think any eyewitness to this was so incredulous that they didn't believe this was actually happening. And I think, obviously now that we've been able to confirm that this actually is the real deal, so to speak, now is starting to set in.
I think also if we could ask our control room to rack up some pictures from before, which shows the plane, because our viewers just joining us, it's really hard to discern what's left of the plane itself, correct, Chris?
It has submerged.
It's also getting a bit darker, but we could see the tail, we could see just some parts of the wing and the fuselage when we first came on the air, but I don't think we can anymore.
No, it looks to be submerged at this point, and I think we should probably say that we're lucky that the plane did stay above sea level as long as it did. It allowed a number of the passengers, like our eyewitnesses have told us, to get off the plane in an expeditious manner and hopefully get to safety. But we will continue to re-rack some of that footage that we do have here. We've been on the scene for probably now about the last half hour, and you can see the emergency crews on hand, and some of the boats are kind of shielding
there it is
the
to the
plane.
left.
You can see it to the left. You can see the wing there, the US Air insignia on the tail fin. And then some of those other boats are hiding the rest of the plane.
Looks like some of the Circle Line or other tour boats. We have Max Gomez, Dr. Max, with us now to talk about, you know, we've been talking about the cold these past couple of days and concerns about hypothermia. The water, Chris, what did you say,
About
Lonnie?
40, Lonnie was telling me about 40 to 42 degrees.
Right. So, there are several things that are lethal in a plane crash. Obviously, it's the impact, and a lot of people die in a fire. It looks like it was coming in low enough and slow enough so that impact wasn't as big an issue. Doesn't appear that they had any fire, so it's hypothermia is a big issue. At about 40 degrees, a person will lose consciousness in about 30 minutes. In the water, submerged in the water, and they can really only survive for perhaps 30 to 90 minutes in the water. And so the idea is to get them out very, very quickly. And so that's about, they get exhausted and they lose consciousness with hypothermia. If they get them out of the water quickly, then it's not too bad, but they also have to be taken to a hospital and be warmed carefully, because the rewarming process can also be very serious. The cold, all of the cold that's in the extremities, the cold blood in the extremities gets flushed to the inside, and then their temperature drops again, and that can also be a problem. But as long as they get to a hospital, they should be okay.
Timing is everything.
Absolutely.
Dr. Max, stay with us, please. Chris?
Okay, Dana, we've got Al Yerman on the phone right now, who's an aviation expert. And Al, as we said, we welcome you to the broadcast here. We're getting word that the plane, this Airbus, did strike a bird. It disabled both engines. Now, on this Airbus 320, there are just two engines. Is that correct? One on each wing?
That's correct.
So they must have flown into I don't want to. It must have been a flock at that point to disable both engines. Is that somewhat accurate?
Well, that could possibly be. The only witness I heard said they saw flames come out of the left engine.
Okay, because we just have word here from the Associated Press, a government official, saying the plane went down over the Hudson, struck a bird that disabled both engines. So,
Okay.
Well, in any event, how, I guess, great an effort did this pilot make to get this plane down, fully loaded with fuel, right after takeoff from LaGuardia, to get it in the water and to enable people to not only land somewhat safely, but to get off in an expeditious manner?
Well, that's an excellent job. The plane looks pretty much intact, and the rescue effort's going on right now. And he made a quick decision to realize he couldn't fly any further and put it down, the control ditch.
Al, what, if you can, help us understand, what would it be like for the passengers? Is the sound suddenly different? Are they hearing nothing? If you lose 1, 2 engines, what's going on in the cockpit and cabin?
They probably heard the explosion.
It does. It makes a loud sound.
It'll make noise for sure. Anything ingested into those engines is going to cause the internal parts of those engines to come apart.
Mm-hmm.
Al, can you tell me how difficult it is to get a plane this size down as safely as they seem to have got this plane down in the Hudson?
Well, in that area there, it looks like it's pretty wide open. It's probably the best area to ditch an airplane, because it looks like he did an excellent job.
But the level of difficulty from, I guess, the most experienced pilot to a pilot that's only got so many hundreds of hours, I mean, this doesn't look like it's something that would be easy to do. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you gauge it?
I would say we're talking about anywhere from 8 to 10, at least an 8.
This happens, I'm sure, more than we're readily aware, that planes or birds fly, are ingested into these engines. Why does it sometimes, like the case we're seeing here, bring a plane down, but at other times it's not as severe?
Well, it depends. As you reported, that there's a dual engine failure. You have no power.
Yeah.
You can't go any further.
How far could it have made it with one engine?
Well, he probably could have returned to the airport.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Al Yerman, thank you so much. I'm sure we will get back with you. Thank you for your expertise.
Okay,
We're looking at a picture, thank you, a picture of a similar airplane right now. The last US Airways Express accident, which involved, and we don't know about injuries or fatalities by numbers here, but January 8th, 2003, outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, both pilots and all 19 passengers were killed in that crash. This also involves Charlotte, North Carolina. They were heading to Charlotte, North Carolina from LaGuardia.
Yeah, exactly. That a Beech 1900.
Different plane.
So yeah, a little bit more of a commuter jet. This is what we call a regional jet, but as you can see by the picture, it is a good-sized aircraft. The Airbus 320, readily used by JetBlue. That's their aircraft of choice. The 320 and the 360. You're looking again at the video from the Hudson here when we first came on the air. This flight 1549 leaving LaGuardia en route to Charlotte. A bird, as we've told you. Disabled. We know at least one of the engines. We're getting some reports it may have been both of the engines. That's why the pilot had to set the plane down in the Hudson. Eyewitness accounts that we do have witnesses to passengers being on the wings almost immediately as the plane touched down, and the ferry services that quickly descended upon the crash site were able to get these people to safety. We're still waiting for word on initial reports of injuries, any fatalities. We have not heard that just yet. Marcia Kramer, who is close to the scene right now, is with us on the phone. Marcia?
Yes, well, I just finished interviewing a number of survivors who were taken to a location on 40th Street. What they told me was they were on the plane. It was about 2 minutes after takeoff when they heard a large boom, and all of a sudden the plane started to lose altitude. They were very laudatory of the rescue efforts. That almost immediately they were, boats were brought to them and they were being taken off the plane. I also saw a stewardess who was being rushed to the emergency room, and other people who were waiting for emergency treatment. There's a huge emergency response. Even now, there are police ESU trucks and ambulances and fire trucks rushing to the scene. And now what they're doing is they're heading further down the West Side Highway because the plane is floating downtown. And so they're trying to catch up with the plane and see if there are other people on the plane. Established a rescue effort on 40th Street and the West Side Highway. They're trying to get some people who were in the water treated for hypothermia and other, shock and other things like that. But the police, once we interviewed a couple of people in their rescue operation, bodily threw us out because it is such a crazy scene down here.
Well, Marcia, could you tell us more? I mean, you were able to speak to some of the survivors, and they were so grateful for how the crew worked. Can you tell us more about what they said and their conditions?
Well, I mean, a lot of them were wet. One person had one of those orange life preservers that you find under the seat of the plane wrapped around his neck. Others were shivering. Police were trying to bring blankets to them. There were people of all ages, young and old. It was really chaotic. Mm-hmm. The rescue effort is just trying to get started. They're trying to figure out at this point who needs to be triaged first. They had a couple of people on stretchers, but they don't have enough stretchers at this point as more rescue crews are arriving. But the people said that they thought that the actions of the police and the fire rescue squads were exemplary because, here they are, there was a boom, and all of a sudden, they're on dry land and they're safe. And,
also when you're in an airplane and, they go through their emergency procedure, and some people are looking at the newspaper and some people have started that nap already, but people were listening. You said they congratulated and were lauding the crew who gave them the instructions that were the real deal this time.
It was the real deal, but also I thought it looked like one of the worst injured at this point was a stewardess who was one of the first people they put on a stretcher, and she was, gasping for breath, and they were trying to comfort her. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to even describe what it's like down here because there's so many people, so many rescuers, and they're now, as I can tell you, racing down the West Side Highway to try to catch up with the plane to see if there are any more survivors. But, the thing is, it's such a cold day, and these people were in the water in the Hudson, which is very cold, and so what they're trying to deal with now is the fact that they were wet, they lost their possessions, most of them don't have coats. I interviewed one elderly woman who could barely talk, who was with a companion who was trying to, get somebody's coat to put over her because she was shivering so badly.
Marcia, the looks on the faces of these people, it must have been something to see.
Well, it's shock more than anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, the flight takes off. 2 minutes later, there's a boom, and they're in the water. I mean, it was like almost instantaneous, and these people are stunned.
Did they say anything about what I'm sure, did the pilot, what he said, or I'm sure they were too upset or, as you say, in shock? Did you have a chance to ask them that? Any words to them as the flight was going down?
The truth is that by the time, as we were trying to do it, the police were shoving us bodily out of the way. Firefighters were shoving us bodily out of the way, and so it was really hard to get much more from them.
All right, Marcia, stay with us. We're going to get back to you in just a second. Just some more information coming in right now. We are now told that the flight was airborne for less than 6 minutes. Its maximum altitude achieved was 3,200 feet before beginning its emergency descent. As you can see, the plane is intact. From our earlier pictures, you can just make out the tail fin right now. But the early unconfirmed reports are that the aircraft did, in fact, hit a flock of geese, therefore disabling both jet engines aboard this Airbus 320. CBS News correspondent Bob Orr is on the line with us right now, and we'd like to talk with Bob real quick. Bob, you there?
I'm here, Chris.
What additional information, if any, do you have on this? And can you believe that this actually happened here?
Well, it's really quite remarkable. Unfortunately, it's a very unusual event. But if this plane was taking off from LaGuardia just after 3 o'clock like we think, and went through a large flock, and I emphasize a large flock of birds, enough so that both the engines were taken out, then what the pilots were able to do here is nothing short of heroic. We know from a couple of flight monitoring services that the flight, as you said, Chris, was not airborne very long, 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Didn't get very high, about 3,200 feet.
3,200 feet, less than 6 minutes.
Yeah. Right, and the way the picture reveals the plane hit the water, it was more of what I would call a controlled landing, a controlled ditching, than a crash from altitude. I mean, there didn't appear to be any kind of fuselage rupture. There was no apparent fuel spill. There was no fire. There was apparently an orderly evacuation. I mean, if you had to go by textbook for a one-off event, this would be a textbook example.
Yeah, the one thing the eyewitnesses, I guess, have been able to attest that this was a perfect emergency landing on water, if there is such a thing, with a full load of fuel, was able to bring nose up and just kind of like a skipping stone, just kind of bring it down and it looks as though save a number of lives. We're not sure exactly how many passengers were on board. Bob, we were talking to an aviation expert, gentleman Al Yerman, before. Just from a level of difficulty, to be able to actually pull something like this off, when something like this happens so quickly, you're the pilot of a plane, you lose both engines, you've got passengers in the back. I mean, just to be able to process all of that and to bring this plane down.
In one of the biggest cities in the world, around skyscrapers, a lot of decision making, and you can't second guess anything, right, Bob?
It's really remarkable, and I'm always a little hesitant to go out too far on the limb, but I would say that this has all the earmarks of being a real heroic job by the pilots, because you have to understand, you have compromised engines, perhaps you don't have any engines, you don't have very much altitude, you don't have very much speed, and you don't have very much room. If you look at the Hudson River when you're down on a boat, it looks pretty wide, but when you're in the air and you see Manhattan on one side and you see Newark on the other side in a very, very congested area, and you have to hit that ribbon of water with very little control in the airplane, I wouldn't want to try it more than once. So I think when we look at all the data, and we look at the flight data recorders and we listen to the cockpit tapes, we'll be able to determine whether they had more time than I think they did, and whether they had time to really troubleshoot this and go down the checklist and warn all the passengers what was going on. Well, but from the outside looking in, this is a remarkable effort.
That was what I wanted to ask you. I mean, you've got your emergency procedures that have to be enacted. They were barely in the air 6 minutes. You lose both engines. I mean, how much at that point do you just kind of go on experience? You throw the checkbook out the list and you just try to save everyone you possibly can.
The one thing I'm struggling with a little bit, and this is all preliminary data, is that if the plane really was in the air for 6 minutes, it didn't get very far from LaGuardia. So I'm wondering if this event happened in stages, or if he maybe was a little bit higher and lost one engine and subsequently lost another. So it may have been kind of incremental, along the way, if you will. I don't think it happened immediately, because it wouldn't have gotten as far as it did. So there's a lot we don't know about this, but from all appearances, the pilots did a good job, the emergency crews did a good job. All of those boats and watercraft in the water, remarkably responded, and in very, very cold conditions, because the Hudson River, I've got to figure, is pretty chilly this time of year with this cold
We're
snap.
talking about 40 degrees right now.
Yeah, that's hypothermia weather.
Yeah.
And to get all those people out is really just fantastic.
We have ground pictures now our viewers are looking at, Bob. We just saw the tail in the water, which we can't see. These are pictures from moments ago. We can't see that anymore. I'm also wondering about the whole air pressure, you know, and how that changes from however high we think the plane was. I mean, that concern for the safety of, you know, people and their heads and their breathing.
Shouldn't have been a problem if the preliminary data is right and it only got to 3,200 feet, not even a mile up. You're still in breathable atmosphere. This is an atmosphere that mountain climbers and even small hill climbers get to all the time. So it's not a problem. I don't think air pressure here would have been a problem. The main thing here is on a full airplane, and we believe there were 151 people on this A320. That's pretty much a packed flight. That means the middle seats are filled. For the crew and the flight attendants to have time to organize an orderly evacuation and then to get people out in what had to be a panic moment without losing control, I don't think we can say enough right now about what an apparently great job they did. Yeah,
we're looking at what looks to be a heroic effort by these pilots. Full capacity, 150. So if we're getting early reports of 151, it looks like someone was in the jump seat as well. Again, still no word on the number of casualties or injured. We talked with Marsha Kramer a few moments ago as basically everyone who did make it out of the water alive was being shuttled to the area hospitals, as quickly as possible, as we are in kind of emergency mode here along the Hudson. Bob Orr, thank you very much. If we have any additional questions or if you have any additional information, we'll get back to you in the next couple of minutes. That's CBS News' Bob Orr, who was kind enough to join us. We have Christine Johnson right now, who's in the newsroom with some additional information. Let's go to Christine right now. Christine?
Chris, I've been following some information coming in to the newsroom that we're confirming here. Right now, we can tell you that the fuselage of this plane is near 23rd Street. It does appear to be obviously floating south in the Hudson River. I can also tell you that the FBI is now confirming that this does not, or they at least have no indication that this is any act of terrorism. That may be obvious right now since all indications show that this was a bird hit. But again, I just wanted to pass along that the FBI, a spokesperson from that agency, is saying as of right now there is no indication that this is an act of terrorism. Also, I know that we have confirmed there are more than 100 firefighters that have been called to this scene. It is an all-out emergency in this area, so everyone that is available obviously is at the scene trying to get this situation under control. You can bet one of the main priorities right now is to make sure that there are no other passengers or crew members on this plane. And as you can tell, we're working against the darkness here. You can bet that the sunset is gonna happen in the next hour or so, and these rescuers want to make sure that they have everyone accounted for before darkness sets in. That's about the latest from here. I'm going to continue to monitor the Associated Press wires, and also we're working the phones here in the newsroom to get you the very latest information.
All right, thank you. We have CBS 2's Lou Young is near the scene on the west side. There you are, Lou. What can you tell us?
We're at West 30th Street. We're at the West 30th Street heliport. We watched the wreckage and the flotilla of rescue boats float by southbound a short time ago. It's down that way, as Christine said, West 23rd Street, and you can see some of the rescue workers and firefighters who've been following this wreckage south along the West Side Highway, along West Street, as it drifts with the flow of the Hudson River. We got out, I got out of a cab at 51st Street to try and put an eyeball on this thing and hoofed it all the way to this point, 21 blocks. We passed Marsha Kramer and her crew up at 54th Street or about 50th Street there, where they were getting people off at the ferry station. We heard people say that they heard the sound of an engine explosion and that this appeared to be a controlled landing by the pilot. The pilot apparently did a very good job. I heard one witness telling police officers that he saw the plane apparently slowing down and setting down under a controlled sort of crash on the water, settling into the water. If this had been a high-speed crash, there would have been a lot of loss of life, a lot of debris breakup. The plane was pretty much intact, and it floated. This looked like a controlled emergency landing. Again, the plane is drifting south. It's just left our eyesight as we speak. If you turn around here, you can see people who are following it south with their cameras, members of the press, emergency workers, all sorts of emergency crews descending on this area. Moments ago, here at the heliport, two aircraft, two choppers from the Nassau County Police settled down to stand by in case they are needed. It appears at this point that most of the urgent rescue is over. We see some of the boats starting to come back. It is our hope that everybody is off the plane. They're watching the wreckage as it drifts south. We're live at West 30th Street. Lou Young, CBS 2 News. Back to you guys.
All right, Lou, we'll check back in with you in a couple of minutes. Dana, just to give everyone home an idea of what we're talking about right now, this plane originally set down at around 48th Street, right by the Intrepid Museum. Right now, it's down in the 20s, so there's current moving very quickly and taking this aircraft due south towards downtown. So if you could see behind Lou Young, we're looking at only probably about another 25 to 30 minutes of light left. You can see the sun just over the horizon there about to set. So now time is of the essence and making sure that everyone is off the plane. You can see the nose up of the plane right here. Also the tail fin, it's almost
curled.
Yeah, kind of rising up a little bit by that on each end of that tug that you're looking at. But this plane is moving very quickly, and again, we cannot stress enough what a heroic effort by these pilots to get this plane down and intact. You would think, and if you've seen movies or you've seen other plane crashes where there have been caught on tape, the tumbling effect that does happen, it does tend to occur if not brought down at the proper trajectory. This was nothing short of heroic. These pilots were able to get this plane down.
Another important factor, not only was he making sure he wasn't hitting a bridge or buildings on either side of the river, but so often the Hudson River is filled with barges and tugs and other small boats, and they're
the Intrepid. I mean, incredible when you think about it.
It's incredible.
Looks big from where we're standing, but if you're in a plane and you're ever circling the city as you're coming in and you see it, it's not a very big ribbon where you can actually bring a plane of this size down. Bob Sims, who is a licensed pilot and one of our engineers here at CBS 2, is on the line with us right now. Bob, you there?
Yeah, hi, Chris.
You saw this come down, Bob. What were your thoughts when you saw this?
Oh, it was just horrible. I was heading home. I was going north on the West Side Highway. And like you said, I'm a private pilot. And this area of the Hudson River, up to 1,100 feet, is what they call the VFR corridor. And there should never be any, large jet commercial traffic in this area. And I'm always very in tune to the aircraft. And I saw this aircraft heading west, coming out over Manhattan, maybe around by the George Washington Bridge, and started to make a slow turn south at about 1,000 feet, which is extremely unusual to see a commercial jet. So it caught my attention, and I'm driving north, and I looked over towards the plane, and I could see flames spewing out of the left engine. From my angle, I couldn't see the right engine, so I couldn't tell you if he had both engine failures, as you've been reporting. But there was definitely problems with the left engine. And it looked like he was having trouble maintaining altitude, and he just kept getting lower and lower. Past me, so I just tried to follow him in my rearview mirror as I'm driving on the highway, and then I lost sight of him, and it was very upsetting. My initial thought was that he was having single-engine failure, and he may be heading over to Newark to declare an emergency landing there. But apparently that he never made it. That wasn't the case. It was just horrible to see.
Horrible to see. We should remind our viewers that there have been rescues. Our reporter Marcia Kramer has talked to survivors, passengers who were on the plane and who are being treated at our local hospital. So that is very good news. Although we don't have complete numbers, we do know there were 5 to 6 crew members on board, and the plane, we believe, carries 150. There have been
150
thoughts
full capacity.
there could be an extra pilot on there to bring it to 151. Thank you so much, and for giving us your perspective of that. I'm sure you thought you were dreaming there.
Yeah, it was horrible.
Horrible
I hope everybody turns out okay.
We do too.
Still waiting to get official confirmation of the word injuries, survivors, everything. Luckily, we do know that there are a number of survivors. Let's go to Joe Bierman, who's live in Chopper 2 HD over the scene. Joe?
Hey, Chris, we monitor all the emergency communications. Now, the divers, which were the first NYPD divers down into the aircraft, they say they have searched the aircraft and they believe everyone is off. They have brought those divers out. They are presumably on one of these boats. They are getting second divers, a whole second fresh crew, to go back down into the jet to make sure everybody's off. But as you saw moments ago, you can see that the tail is starting to sink, and you saw the nose of the plane coming up. One of the reasons why there will be survivors in this crash is that the aircraft appears to have stayed intact. We could see the tail, we could see the nose, and as the tail sinks, the nose starts to come up. Now, they're keeping all of us in the media about 2 miles away. That's why we can't get closer because of all the rescue equipment and the police choppers. They have brought in, as Lou Young said, 2 helicopters from Nassau County PD to West 30th Street in case they're needed. The Jersey State Police Aviation Unit is standing by on the Jersey side. Now, it looks like the big fireboat there right in the middle, he's just trying to keep an eye on where the aircraft actually is. I am just amazed that something that weighs this much has not sunk completely into the river. But the aircraft continues to remain afloat. But I say, as a little bit of good news, they said the first divers that went down came back up, said they believe everybody got off the aircraft.
Everybody, they believe that. That's your first thing.
That's what they're saying on the police radios, that they pulled the first set of divers out. They came up. They had believed everybody was off the aircraft. They were requesting a second crew of divers to go into the aircraft. Right now, what they're doing is searching up and down the river because of the tides. There may be still some people in the river. We're listening to a police helicopter that believes he spots something in the river. He's unsure whether it's a victim or debris, so they're trying to get a boat into that area. Obviously, an ongoing search, major search continues here. Right now, their main focus is around the aircraft itself. But again, this would have been an amazing landing in the Hudson River if he had departed on runway 31 out of LaGuardia. That's 310 degrees, which is kind of the west. He would have departed west over the Triborough, up over Central Park. As witnesses said, he was up by the George Washington Bridge, which is kind of far for them to normally be. So it sounds like at that point he had figured out he was going to have to put it down in the Hudson River. I can't think of in the last 20 years of an aircraft doing landing here in the Hudson River other than maybe a little Cessna or a Piper.
Well, Joe, that's what I wanted to ask you. As a pilot, you've seen your share of mishaps, whether it's a chopper or a Cessna, or to see something like this, you must just kind of shake your head.
I mean, talk about modern day miracles. There, as we move a little bit, you can see I guess that's the left wing coming up out of the water.
Yeah.
You can see
the nose cone a bit.
The nose cone, the cockpit. We had seen it would have been the right front door. That was wide open. So that was a good sign. Maybe that's how they got majority of the people out of the aircraft.
I'm sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, as you can see, all the emergency equipment still surrounds the aircraft. It is just amazing that this aircraft is intact. The pilots would have done a great job bringing it down here in the Hudson River.
And it has moved at least 20 blocks, measuring it by the streets, from what our reporter Lou Young has said. You can see that wing tipped up a bit as things have changed. And once they have accounted for all the people, of course, there's the environmental concern as well for all of that fuel on board. Dr. Max Gomez, you wanted to add something.
Well, there were a couple of things. We saw both doors were open, so they would have had an opportunity to evacuate on both sides. And something that we ought to say here is that commercial pilots train for these sorts of emergencies all the time. They're in simulators. They get thrown all sorts of curveballs when they're lifting off, they're landing. So they have trained for this sort of occurrence exactly. And I mean, it's amazing. That just shows you what the training can do, that they were able to actually put that into effect. This is not the first time these pilots have been confronted with that kind of an emergency. It's the first time for real, but they've been confronted with that many times before in trainers.
I think it also goes to the fact that I know we all take this for granted. You hop on a plane, they give you the safety instructions, and some people pay attention, some people don't. You have to pay attention to every word that these people say, especially in light of a situation like this. From what we've heard from our eyewitness accounts, the flight attendants, the crew were able to, and I mean basically get into emergency mode immediately and get people off these planes. Everyone, no matter whether you're working on the plane or you're a passenger, there is a certain level of trauma involved in just being scared out of your daylights when something like this happens. For them to be able to channel that and get these people off safely,
and
it's
for
amazing.
the pilot knowing he's got that corridor of the Hudson River, but then you're coming down to Lower Manhattan, the Statue of Liberty, and you're, you know, Staten Island and Jersey on the right, you're going to run out of water. So it was to do it now, or Lord knows.
Well, that and the fact that you're bringing a plane this size down the Hudson River here in New York City. You can just imagine what was going through this pilot's mind and his co-pilot and the rest of the crew on board. But we can say this right off the bat, before we even hear from this captain and co-pilot, which I'm sure we will over the next few days, what an incredible effort on their behalf. And once again, this is you know, a sheer example of this city's emergency crews being able to spring into action. And it looks like from what we've kind of avoided total catastrophe here and got some survivors.
Marcia Kramer on the scene for us on the west side. And Marcia, we appreciate you've talked to some survivors. What else can you tell us about what they have said and what's happening there at the scene?
Well, Dana, right now I'm standing outside where they're triaging patients, and I'm going to ask the cameraman to pan so that you can see that now there's a huge line of ambulances that have arrived on the scene, and they're waiting here to accept patients. If the cameraman will pan a little bit over, you'll see that there's the triage center where they brought many of the survivors, and they've moved more ambulances into the triage center, more stretchers, and they're waiting lined up, a huge line of ambulances waiting to take people for treatment. They're not only fire department ambulances, but it seems that they've brought ambulances from all over the city. There's one that says senior care, another one that says trans care. There's an, you know, FDNY ambulance. They're getting ambulances from any place that they can to try to treat these people. Now remember, a lot of these people had gone into the water and they have hypothermia as well as other injuries. You know, I talked to a number of the survivors. There's a lot of shock, surprised because the explosion happened so quickly after takeoff. In fact, one of the people that I just spoke to said to me, you know, we just got on the plane and the pilot said, we're going down, get ready, we're going down. A dramatic event. Now, if you can take a look, if you can pan over a little bit more, you can see that there are whole groups of people. Some of them are survivors, some of them are friends of survivors, and they're trying to rush to get them into some kind of shelter. As I said, I spoke to a number of survivors, and here's what they said to me.
Less than 2 minutes up in the air, it was a big boom. Everybody smelled smoke. We lost altitude. And looked like we were going to Newark because they weren't turning around. And then as we got lower and lower, the pilot said brace for impact, and we landed. Yeah, we're all okay. I think everybody got off.
The plane went down. I don't know what happened. There was an explosion on the plane, and we had to make an emergency landing in the water. They did a phenomenal job getting everybody out.
Okay, so what you can see now is more ambulances, more police officials, more fire department trucks arriving on the scene. It's a lot more orderly than it was, but it's still very chaotic. There's Red Cross people arriving. I mean, people are just trying to find a way to treat the people who they rescued from the plane. It was an amazing rescue effort. People said that a lot of people said that they got off the plane very quickly, but on the other hand, they said that there weren't very many instructions about how to save yourselves. But nevertheless, a huge rescue effort right now on the part of New York City. In fact, other people are arriving here. I just spoke to Malcolm Smith, the state Senate Majority Leader, who came just to see what he could do to help. We're live at the scene. I'm Marcia Kramer, CBS 2 News.
All right, Marcia.
Thank you.
Yeah, in times of emergency, especially in this city, it's all hands on deck, like Marcia alluded to. You've got ambulances from every walk of life out here that are down here trying to help at this point. You're looking at live pictures right now of this Airbus 320. We've been with you on the air here for about the greater part of the last 90 minutes or so. When we first got word that Flight 1549 leaving LaGuardia en route to Charlotte, US Airways Airbus 320, both engines disabled, and the pilots, we can't emphasize this enough, doing a miraculous job of getting this plane down in the Hudson River. You're looking at these live pictures. You can see the tail fin with the US Airways insignia on the fin right now. That seems to be just about the only part of the plane that is still above sea level at this point. That tug, that fire tug right there, shielding a little bit of the nose cone, which is still somewhat exposed. But the reports we're getting, a number of people were quickly rescued, and on the wings of the plane, the flight crew did a wonderful job opening the doors and I guess getting the safety rafts out getting the life preservers around as many passengers as possible and getting them to safety. We don't have a confirmation exactly how many passengers were on board the plane. At full capacity, this is 150 passengers. We don't think that it was a full load at this point. But now we continue to just kind of, I guess, take in more information as it continues to pour in right now. We know this aircraft was only airborne for less than 6 minutes, only achieved a maximum altitude of about 3,200 feet before reportedly flying into a flock of geese, which disabled both engines.
And as we heard from one of the survivors there, very calm man, Jay McDonald, saying that the captain's saying, we're going down, we're going down. So we do know everyone, we've heard from the police, everyone got out. We've heard from the FBI that Homeland Security and the FBI says this is not an act of terrorism, but an accident. We have CBS 2's Lou Young on the scene, who's been hoofing it down the West Side Highway as the plane has been going down the Hudson River. Lou, what do you know?
Well, what we can tell you is that the plane that's sinking in the Hudson River right now was on its way to Charlotte, and the people who are on board say they heard just a loud explosion several minutes after takeoff, and then that controlled hard landing on the Hudson River. We spoke with one man who had a window seat to disaster in seat 22A from Norwalk, Connecticut, and he said that it happened very suddenly. I want you to listen to what he has to say.
About 3 or 4 minutes into the flight, I was sitting in 22A, so the left engine just blew. Fire, flames coming out of it, and I was looking right at it because I was sitting right there. And it just started smelling a lot like gasoline. And a couple minutes after that, the pilot said, you guys got to brace for a hard impact. And that's when everyone started, to be honest, saying prayers. And I just kept saying, relax, relax, women and children first. And then it just started filling with water quick. So people were jumping out of the plane into the boats.
Yeah, it was a chaotic scene on the plane, and also when he got onto the shoreline, he said he saw some people who were very badly injured. According to that man, he said one woman apparently lost her leg in the impact, so it was a very hard hit on the water there. A lot of chaos as people tried to get sorted out, and they tried to triage some of the injured in a spot where Marcia is a little bit north of here. You can see it's very quiet now. It's settled down. This is full of emergency crews. A little while ago, you've got the New Jersey State Police chopper and Nassau County chopper standing by, but it appears at this point that everybody has been cleared off that plane, and it looks like it's settling down now. The plane continues to drift south from this point. We're at West 30th Street. Lou Young, CBS 2 News.
All right, Lou, thank you. And interesting to hear from Jay. We were really right in that seat with him, 22A, as he saw flames come from that left engine. It's also important to note about, we might think landing on water is going to be soft.
No.
Although we have heard, Lonnie, as far as winds, any indication?
The winds were not an issue in something like this. They were blowing at a maximum speed of around 12 miles per hour out of the northwest. A plane this size is not going to be affected by a wind that's blowing at 12 miles per hour.
Or the river itself also. I'm speaking of the waves in the river as far as how that could impact.
Well, it is. Now, this is something, because as a licensed pilot myself, when we're trained for a water landing, we're trained to read the waves in the water, because you don't want to be landing with them against them. Exactly. And so I don't know the current situation with.
But it looks as though with the current of the Hudson, he were coming from the George Washington Bridge south. He was able to land with the current.
You're exactly right.
With the tide, so to speak.
I'm referring, Chris, to what the winds are doing to the water.
On the phone with us now is Christina Staffo with Metro Traffic. We have already put up a graphic saying that the West Side Highway closed south of 79th Street. We're sure there are many other streets affected by this. Christina?
Oh, thank you guys so much. And that's right, the southbound side of the West Side Highway at 79th Street is completely shut down right now. All traffic is being detoured at 79th onto 79th Street. Now, also, 42nd Street has lane closures because of emergency activity related to this situation. Now, if you're making your way northbound on the West Side Highway, we're not looking at any road closures right now. However, we are looking at lots of slow-moving traffic as people are definitely, slowing down just to see what's going on in the area. Now, also, if you're making your way in New Jersey, you want to keep in mind the Port Imperial Boulevard in both directions. This is in Weehawken, right along the river between 60th Street and 19th Street. That's shut down for emergency activity going on. And obviously you're going to see these closures until further notice. Now, luckily, the crossings, the Lincoln Tunnel, the Holland Tunnel, we're not looking at too much of a delay, either one of those crossings. And as far as New York waterway is concerned, you just want to anticipate delays on boats that are going to be crossing the river. So you just definitely want to check in and make sure that your tickets are still valid. So you just definitely want to avoid these areas. I mean, I don't know what else to say about that. Just avoid the areas altogether, because you're going to see all of this emergency activity there definitely until further notice.
All right, Christina Stoffel.
Thank you.
Metro Traffic, thank you.
Yeah, basically, in summation, stay away from the West Side Highway. There's so many emergency workers that are there and need the space, and traffic is not an additional element they need to deal with right now. Avoid the West Side Highway, plain and simple. To hear some of these eyewitness accounts, though, Dana, when we hear from Jeff College a second ago, who was sitting right over the wing where the engine went, and then just to hear the captain say, brace for a hard landing.
Suddenly,
you can't imagine anyone who has ever been on a plane before. It's a nerve-wracking enough experience, even if you like to fly, to hear those words, to experience that. It's miraculous.
How we all said our prayers.
Yep.
I mean, suddenly you're strangers, you're family.
You know what it's like. You've been on a plane. You experience heavy turbulence. Yep. The plane shifts dramatically, and it's at that point you say to yourself, you have no control of what's going on here, and you're just at the mercy of the pilots. And I just can't imagine what these poor people had to go through. We have heard from that eyewitness that there are some serious injuries, and we'll continue to bring you more information on that. Let's go to Christine Johnson, who's in the newsroom right now. Christine?
Well, Chris and Dana, I just wanted to update you on a couple of facts. First, the FAA is confirming that everyone on board has been accounted for. That is good news. The plane is now empty. Everyone on board has been accounted for. Also, we are hearing from the FAA that the plane did go down 3 minutes right after takeoff. Not obviously a lot of time in the air before they crashed into the Hudson River. So again, they were only in the air for 3 minutes before this crash happened. Now, I do want to also mention that a lot of our CBS affiliates across the nation are now joining our live broadcast here from New York City. So I want to just recap exactly what has happened, what has transpired here in the city in the past hour and a half. First, US Airways Flight 1549, carrying, we can tell you, at least 150 passengers. It departed from LaGuardia Airport in New York. They were en route to Charlotte, North Carolina. Once again, the FAA just confirming minutes ago that this plane was only in the air for 3 minutes before it crashed. Obviously, the response to this was enormous. Boats from the New York waterways, the Coast Guard, they all converged onto the scene near 48th Street, right off of the West Side Highway where the plane crashed. Now, the government is saying right now that this does not appear to be terror-related. It does not appear to be terror-related. What it does appear to be is a horrible accident. The government says that 2 engines went down after a bird strike. There was one report that it was a flock of birds. We do not know that, but obviously if both engines went down, you can probably surmise that it was more than one bird that was hit. Now, every pilot that we've spoken to, every witness that we've spoken to said that this was nothing short of a miracle about how this pilot and his crew brought this plane down. You can see from those pictures, actually the earlier pictures, the live pictures that you see here right now are only the tail of the plane, of the US Airways plane, but I can tell you that earlier you could see the entire plane and everything appeared to be intact. So it actually, witnesses say that it actually looked like a controlled descent as this plane went down into the Hudson River. You can still see there that the Coast Guard boats and some New York waterway boats are still there at the scene. More than 100 firefighters also responded, and you can bet that every available ambulance responded to this area to take care of victims. Joe Bierman, our pilot in Chopper 2 HD, said that the divers did make an initial pass. They did want to make a second run through just to make sure that everyone has been accounted for. And once again, the FAA confirming to CBS 2 News that everyone has been accounted for on this plane. However, we do not have any details about any injuries, the seriousness of injuries, but you can bet with the impact of the plane hitting the water, there are more likely we're going to be hearing about some injuries later on as the story develops. Another thing I want to mention here is obviously they are working up against Mother Nature. It is frigid outside right now, and you can bet those waters are also very frigid. You could see the passengers on the wings of the plane after the plane crashed, waiting to be rescued, and they are now working against darkness here, but the good thing is that everyone has been accounted for. Passengers obviously so thankful for these crews' heroic efforts. You can see some of the passengers there with their yellow life vests on being rescued after being taken off that plane, and obviously some of those ambulances there that are help those passengers as well. But you can bet these passengers are so grateful to this crew. We heard from some of them earlier just basically saying that they heard a loud boom, and then the pilot saying, you know, we're going down, we're going down. And if you can just imagine only being in the air for 3 minutes, but right after taking off, I mean, you don't really even have time. A lot of these passengers probably haven't even settled into their seats yet, you know, to get comfortable. They were probably still, you know, putting away their Blackberries and things like that. So this obviously, the chain of events that happened here are so quick, and you can just imagine the shock that they are feeling right now. The passengers are being taken to the New York Waterways Terminal in New York and also in Weehawken to be treated. And again, once again, we do not know any word of any seriousness of the injuries, but we are putting calls into the area hospitals to get the very latest on that information. I was also just handed this email, and I'm just going to read this cold here. The TSA is monitoring the situation involving US Airways Flight 1549. At this point, there is no indication that this is a security-related incident. TSA will continue to monitor the situation and provide updates if appropriate. And I also saw on the Associated Press wires earlier that US Airways is going to hold a news conference as well. And of course, when that happens, we will bring it to you live. That's about the latest from here. Chris and Dana, I'll keep updating you as more information becomes available.
Thank you,
Christine. One quick question for you. The FAA, did they confirm how many passengers were on board? We know it's a capacity of 150, but we don't have the exact total, right?
We still do not have the exact total yet, Chris.
All right, thank you. Christine Johnson, we will check back in with you periodically in the newsroom. What we do know now, and Christine alluded to it a second ago, from their home headquarters in Tempe, Arizona, US Airways will hold a press conference in the coming moments. When, of course, they go to the microphone, we will bring you that press conference live here on CBS 2 as we continue to monitor live pictures right here. Joe Bierman upstairs in Chopper 2 HD with another report for us. Joe?
Hey, Chris, one of the complications here, there's some weather starting to move in. You'll notice the picture looks a little fuzzy. It's not fuzzy. The problem is it is actually snow. There's a squall coming out of the west. So that's going to cause complications here for folks down in the rescue operation. But again, it appears they have everybody off. The aircraft at this point has floated almost all the way down to the Holland Tunnel. It originally started all the way up by the Intrepid, so that's a large distance. It is still not submerged. You can see the left wing there is up. The tail is still up, so a lot of the emergency equipment is surrounding it. They may have even attached lines, I'm guessing, from the large tugboat there from the fire department to the actual aircraft to help it float, because obviously they want to keep an eye on where it is. It is going to be vital in the investigation to determine exactly what happened. But we'll keep you updated. Back to the studio.
Thank you. Joe Bierman live in Chopper 2, as close as he can get. They've been asked to move back for the safety of that area. We have CBS 2's weatherman Lonnie Quinn with us here, too, and Joe talking. We could see
about some weather moving in.
The skies have changed, and we're not just talking about losing daylight.
Yeah, we've got some pockets of light snow out there. Visibility is going to be an issue. Guys, if we could just possibly pull up our Titan radar picture. I want to show people at home what we're looking at out there. We do see those clouds being pushed in, and if Mike, my producer, wouldn't mind pulling up a true view, let's check in on what we're looking at there outside right now for winds. You know, that's been the big story. We've been talking about these really brutal winds kicking in. Well, they haven't been anything thus far. The winds at the time of this crash were around 10 to 12 miles per hour. That was not an issue.
And
Dana?
We've just been told that Joe Bierman has to land because of the weather concerns. And as you move away and land, Joe, that's a picture we haven't seen, that wide shot, as you go farther and farther away from the scene. Joe?
Yeah, that's the wide shot there, Dana. You can see through the snow. It landed right in the middle of the Hudson River there, and that's where it remains. You can't really see it too much.
It's very hard to see, but we got a quick glimpse. You get to the ground safely, and thank you for your perspective from the sky, and thank your pilot as well.
You're looking at our traffic cam right now. We have these situated around the city, and this is one obviously that is able to focus in on the site. Not the pictures are not as clear as what you were getting from Chopper 2 HD, but it's the best we can do for you at this point. Like Lonnie mentioned and Joe Bierman mentioned a second ago, small weather squall moving in right now. It's forcing our chopper to have to move out of the area for the time being, but this has been an incredible, I would say, 90-plus minutes of what we've watched unfold here on the Hudson River. At first, and I think we're all quick to admit, when you first saw the pictures, no way.
It was
no
very
way this could be real.
looking, too.
It did. You had all the boat was only half submerged. The plane was only half submerged. There was all these tugs around it and other boats around it. Just didn't have the feel of this is an emergency situation. Right. And then the more reports we got in, the more we were able to surmise that this was an actual crash landing on the Hudson River. This flight, 1549 en route from LaGuardia to Charlotte, North Carolina. We're finding out now reports that this plane was in the air from anywhere from 3 to 4 minutes. And Lonnie Quinn, who's seated to my right, who was a licensed pilot, I guess the one thing we had talked about earlier, altitude is your friend.
That's a saying in aviation. Yep, the higher you are, you use your altitude to set your maximum glide speed, and you can pick out an opening, or even a place like Newark Airport. They didn't have enough altitude. He only had about 3,000 feet. I mean, that is nothing, guys.
And as a pilot, also, you're trained, keep it away from buildings, keep it away from populated areas.
And in a situation like this,
ribbon of water,
the Hudson River would be perfect.
His only option. Altitude, from the reports that we have here, less than 3,200 feet. So this is not a lot of time to work with when you've got a fully loaded plane. Fully loaded, when I say that, I mean with fuel.
Yeah.
And nowhere to go, and both of your engines disabled due to, again, these are all unconfirmed reports, but this plane approaching a flock of geese, the geese disabling both engines. Some of the passengers, like we told you, saw the flame outs of both engines, and then the pilot's last words, get ready for a hard landing, assume crash
Going
positions.
down, we're going down.
We're going down.
Not his last words,
no.
Because we do believe, we have been told that.
Last words before impact, I should have stressed.
Yes, that we don't know the extent of injuries, but we have been told, it's been reported, there are no fatalities.
No fatalities, but some serious injuries.
Some serious injuries, and we will get those injury updates. And Max Gomez, when we were talking earlier just about the concern of hypothermia, but we witnessed them getting out quickly.
Exactly, and it looks like no one was in the water, probably no one was in the water long enough for severe hypothermia by itself to be an issue. However, a lot of people on there may have had heart conditions as they rewarm. It's a real shock to the system, so there still might be some issues involved in there. And we heard that there may have also been some impact injuries as well. So we'll find out a little bit more about that as they get taken to the hospitals. And we talked about training a little bit earlier in the broadcast, and this is not only the training for the stewardesses and the pilots who are able to bring them in and then bring the plane in and then be able to get everybody off in an orderly fashion, but it's another reason why you pay attention to the emergency instructions there, because they tell you about where your life preservers are, how to brace yourself during an impact,
where your exits are.
Do you go forwards or do you go backwards? That's another reason. And also the seat belts. I mean, if you're not buckled in tight and you hit the water, that's where you get these really severe impact injuries.
And as we heard from one of the survivors, Jay from Norwalk, Connecticut, the water's filling the cabin. Right. So decisions have to be made quickly as well when you're talking about know where your exit is.
That's right. Know where your exit is. In this case, it looked like only the front two exits were available, so everybody had to, 150 people or so, had to go and get off in an orderly fashion off the front of the airplane. So that's part of why you pay attention.
Only got seconds to work with, and like we said, we can't emphasize this enough. It looks as though the flight attendants and the pilots did just a miraculous job, not only getting the plane down, but getting people off the plane as well. Marcia Kramer, who is along the West Side Highway right now, who's been providing some eyewitness accounts for us, is with us again. Marcia?
Well, Chris, you know, things are still very chaotic here, but I just talked to somebody from the DCPI, the Police Information Office, who told me that there were about 146 people that were rescued. Some of them actually rescued in New Jersey, some of them rescued here. But as the cameraman is going to pan off, you can see that there's still an awful lot of emergency vehicles here, ambulances, fire vehicles, and police vehicles. But the scene is actually starting to seem more normal. And believe it or not, if you can see some some of the people who are over there, people are actually coming here because it's the end of the day and they want to take their ferries back to where they're going in New Jersey. So there's some small return to normalcy, but it wasn't that way earlier when the plane crashed. And I can tell you, when I talked to some of the survivors, it was crazy. This is what they had to say.
In 2 minutes up in the air, it was a big boom. Everybody smelled smoke. We lost altitude, and looked like we were going to Newark because they weren't turning around. And then as we got lower and lower, the pilot said brace for impact, and we landed. Yeah, we're all okay. I think everybody got off.
The plane went down. I don't know what happened. There was an explosion on the plane, and we had to make an emergency landing in the water. They did a phenomenal job getting everybody out.
Now, at this point, some of the fire trucks are starting to leave the scene, but the ambulance are staying. They're waiting to see how many more people they need to take to emergency hospitals to treat them for hypothermia and any other injuries. Reporting live at the scene, I'm Marcia Kramer, CBS 2 News.
Marcia, let me ask you, getting back to the ferries that you were talking about, the people that are coming down expecting to take their ferry across the river, are the ferries running again, or are people basically being pushed aside and told we're not operating at the moment?
Well, just a few minutes ago, I saw a ferry leave from Manhattan and go to the New Jersey side. But I'm also told by the police that some of those ferries actually serve to act as rescue vehicles to help the people to safety. Yeah. But it did appear that one of the water ferries was going to New Jersey to take passengers there.
Okay, Marcia, thank you. We'll check back in with you. That was why I asked. We looked earlier from the preliminary pictures we had earlier on, about close to 2 hours ago now. A number of those ferries were aiding in the rescue effort. I didn't know whether they were put back on normal duty or whether they were just continuing to help out.
Now, we have heard from earlier today that the information coming in, this whole accident was caused by, what did you say, Chris, a flock of geese?
Flock of geese, that's the preliminary reports. A flock of geese, exactly, disabling both engines. Now, because Dana, you look at the picture of the Airbus that we showed earlier, it's an engine on each wing. There's not one on the tail wing, but on the tail fin rather, but it's a major engine on each wing. And Al, who we spoke to earlier, who was our aviation expert, was able to tell us that, at that point, if one is disabled, you can still probably turn the plane around and get back to either Newark, LaGuardia, the closest airport at that point. But like I alluded to, our aviation expert Al Yerman said, both engines go out like that. Basically, you're at the mercy of your altitude. You're just gliding home at that point. And
Chris, obviously the FAA is going to dredge this plane out of the Hudson, and they're going to determine exactly what the cause was. Because I'll tell you, as a pilot, to have both engines go out because of a bird strike, it's incredibly rare. So I'm going to wait to see what the FAA says.
Because it does happen with regularity, birds being engulfed into the engines like that. It doesn't necessarily always cause a flame out like it did here, but to have a double engine failure due to a approaching flock of geese like that, it is luckily it doesn't happen more.
And there was on the Associated Press late this afternoon from a retired Delta Airlines pilot, Joe Mazzone, saying it's not unusual for birds to strike planes. In fact, he says when planes get ready to take off, if there are birds in the area, the tower will alert the crew because they literally just choke out the engine and it quits. So they're always on the lookout for them because of what can happen and what did happen this afternoon in the Hudson River. And I have to say, it is unusual that this happened near the Intrepid, when you think of what Intrepid means. Thinking of these pilots, fearless, courageous, these courageous pilots who safely brought this plane down. And we know there are injuries, but we are told that everyone has been rescued from the scene of a plane crash in the Hudson River.
To avoid catastrophic loss, or like we've mentioned earlier, to be able to get a plane this size, to get a plane this size down in the water and not have it tumble, break apart.
That's the big thing.
With all the fuel on board. Because when you hit water at that speed, and we're talking about speeds of in excess of 100 miles an hour, it's like hitting concrete.
You're right. I had a friend who did a water landing in a much smaller plane, and he described it as being like a human skipping stone. Now, in a plane like this that's coming down, the eyewitnesses said the landing gear was not down. Well, the landing gear wouldn't be down because the pilot wants that bottom of that plane to be as smooth as possible to sort of skip over that water. But then, Chris, what the pilot's got to do is he's got to keep that nose from hitting the water. The minute that nose hits the water, then the impact is so much worse.
Yeah, it's. I think this will go down in the annals of emergency and crash landings, probably the textbook case of if this is going to happen, if A happens or B happens, this is how you approach it. This becomes
if it's got to happen, you want to have a result like this.
Title A in the manual. Again, we continue to just kind of disseminate the information as it comes in right now. We still have no word on the number of injuries. We're getting some unconfirmed reports that there was 147 rescued individuals from this Airbus 320 that went down in the Hudson. Full capacity 150. We're getting reports, rescues on both the New Jersey side and the New York City side here. The initial impact at 48th Street. The current has taken this Airbus 320 close now to about almost 2 miles downtown with the current. And you're looking at some live pictures here from one of our traffic cams. Joe Bierman, who was live in Chopper 2 HD for us, so the last 2 hours had to pull the chopper aside due to a small weather squall that had moved in here for a couple of minutes. We'll have Lonnie Quinn update that in a couple of moments. But here we are at the top of the hour, 5 o'clock here on CBS 2 News at 5. Now joining me, Christine Johnson. As we continue to just watch what looks like a miraculous job by captain and crew of Flight 1549, leaving LaGuardia en route for Charlotte, North Carolina.